Hello, welcome to Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America. I'm your host, Tabitha Ziegler. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. I've got a very special guest today. We're going to be speaking with David Delisle. So, David, take it away.
Awesome. So excited to be here again, Tabitha, to talk to you. It's been forever, so I know we'll have a lot of fun getting into all the things today.
I can't wait to hear about what you're into next. I know about your book, so you might as well go ahead and speak about your current book, and I imagine there's lots more coming.
Yeah. So the big thing for me is trying to teach financial literacy, but in a way that's really, really fun for both kids and parents. So I wrote a book that teaches financial literacy, but it's a graphic novel. So fully illustrated, a little boy goes on a fun adventure, and it makes learning about money really fun. And more importantly, for me anyway, it doesn't just emphasize how to make money. It focuses a little bit more on your relationship to money mindfulness, your mindset, what's important to you, values, all these things that we never really teach and are maybe a little more difficult to teach. And I try to do it in a fun adventure. So that's sort of the core. That's the seed of all this adventure that I've been on teaching kids. And
you want to tell everybody what the book is called, because I think we missed that part already.
I know, I get so excited just talking about the stuff, I forget to promote the thing. So it's called The Golden Quest. You can get it at any local bookstore, or you can get it on Amazon, and it's a lot of fun. So The Golden Quest is what started all this. And then recently I've been sort of building more of a system around all of this. So a financial literacy system or freedom system for parents, for kids, that includes the book, but also a card deck that I'm working on that's just being completed, which I'm actually the most excited about, because this card deck, it's prompts that get you to just sort of think a little bit differently. But in that thinking, the lesson is just baked right in, but it's not difficult. Like one of my favorite prompts, for example, is if you lived on a magical island that gave you everything you ever wished for, what would you do all day? And so it just gets you to just sink into, what really are your values? What would be important to you if you weren't chasing money? What is the thing that brings you the most joy? And there's no right or wrong answer. Like, that's what I love about all these. I don't lead people towards saving or investing or spending. It's all just awareness and thought. And the beauty is in doing it as a family, you learn a little bit more about everybody. So it's, and the lesson is in the conversation and the reflection. And
well, maybe you'd like to speak about your family a little bit, because we have something in common. And, since this podcast is about autism and neurodiversity, I think maybe you'd just like to speak a little bit more about your own experience.
Yeah, so I've got, and this is actually why I started the book, is because I wrote it for my kids. I've got 2 young boys that are getting a little older now, so they're not so young. The oldest one just turned 16, so got his driver's license just this past week. And the younger one's 13. And both boys, but yeah, the older one, he is on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And the younger one, both of them ADHD,
mm-hmm.
gifted, and all of those things. But it's definitely been an experience, because for me with my guys, especially the older one, you could tell there was, just some stuff that was different, but not
mm-hmm.
so obvious. So it's one of those things where a lot was expected from him.
Yeah.
And even now, people don't appreciate maybe how difficult some things are for him.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, because I saw that, I really leaned heavily into, socializing him, making all these things just feel easy and natural. So I see him now, and he's going into grade 11, and he's got like a rich friend group. He reaches
mm-hmm.
out to his friends. A lot of times he's the one who organizes things, and really he's overcome a lot of those little things. But I can
mm-hmm.
tell that so much of it has been learned. Like even looking someone in the eye, I
mm-hmm.
don't think that came naturally to him. He does it
mm-hmm.
now, and he'll greet you and he'll shake your hand, he'll look you in the eye. But it's sort of like these things that we take for granted.
Yeah.
Um, our gifted kids, there's something they have to learn. And it doesn't mean they
Hmm.
can't learn it. It's just they don't do some of those things naturally. They don't read cues the same way or look for cues or see the world the same way. And so it's so exciting because that's part of the beauty is that they don't see the world the same way. So there's so many amazing things that they do see, but we can't expect the same things always from them because it's just not natural.
Well, we actually have a lot in common, David. Like in our personal lives, and I know we've spoken outside of this, so I think it's be good time to just highlight it about all the travel and how both of us share that in common with really trying to create new adventures and experiences for our kids. Like maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about your, most recent, maybe it's not your most recent, but a big adventure that you had with your boys in, was it India and Nepal?
Yeah, just India, but
Okay.
that was last summer and definitely a good adventure. And travel is so huge. Like I don't know if people fully appreciate how much travel allows you to see the world differently, but people differently. So when we talk about things like empathy or generosity or gratitude, it really there's nothing I've experienced that makes those things well, unless it's, crises that makes
Mhm.
you really notice these things and teach them to your kids in a better way. And to be clear, when I say travel, I don't mean vacationing. And that's the
Right.
thing is I think a lot of people they equate the two. I mean, if I'm going and doing an all inclusive on a
Yeah, we're not talking
cruise or the
about
beach,
Disneyland.
no, it's a whole different experience.
Yeah,
That's
it's not Epcot.
mhm. And I think that's the thing is a lot of people, they don't actually travel. They might vacation. They might spend a weekend somewhere or even a week, but they're seeing all the highlights. They're surrounded by tourists. They're seeing that type of stuff, which again, isn't a bad thing. It's fun as well, but it's not the same as travel. And so you're mentioning like the trip to India. So, and this one, I mean, it, it really was ridiculous. And I wouldn't recommend people jumping into it if they've never done some travel. It's something you need to be a little bit more ready for. And again, the way I travel, it wasn't, through a tour or with a group of friends or even other fellow travelers. We were in the thick of it. So we landed in Delhi and just hit the ground running. We then flew to Ladakh in the
Hmm.
northern area of India and basically did like a 7 day trek that was, through basically the Himalayan mountain range.
Hmm.
And we like had altitude sickness. It was heat. It was these long treks. We were completely unprepared, but that's what made it so fun because my guys are so resilient and they can see some of the stuff and experiencing just different cultures, different areas. It was just so amazing. And something that was really important to me is I know we hear this thing about, gratitude and appreciating what you have and how you have, more than other people might have.
Hmm.
And and I mean, there is a lesson in that, but I don't love the dynamic it sets up where like you have more than someone else or you're better
Hmm.
off than someone else. So one of my favorite experiences in India, and this is what I was trying to encourage my boys, is just spending time with some of these locals that maybe didn't have anything, but not seeing them as less, but just seeing them as different.
Right.
And I remember a moment where we were in this place. This is a place that has like no running water, no electricity, and eggs are a luxury.
Hmm.
And my younger guy was just like feel a little sick because the altitude, like it was hitting all
Hmm.
of us. And he's
Sure.
just laying there, and the host of the home like came over and put a blanket on him and gave him some
Hmm.
tea and like a cookie, and you could just see him light up. And he just told me how much she reminded him of his grandma. And I just
Mm.
love that, like seeing these people as family or equals or the same as us, even though they live completely different lives. I mean, that's some of the stuff we get from travel that I don't think people always fully appreciate if they haven't sort of had some of those experiences.
Well, speaking of your mother, I think this is on the list of the things we were going to talk about. Would you like to speak a little bit about your background and how that has also maybe influenced your travel? Because you kind of have a particular experience that some other people don't have.
Yeah. So definitely there's some stuff with the family. So my parents are very different. My mom was born in Japan, grew up in
Mm-hmm.
Canada,
Mm-hmm.
but it's interesting because she was sort of raised not realizing it, but with very sort of Buddhist philosophies.
Mm-hmm.
So her views on the world and approach to things is very different. And then my dad, who was First Nations,
Mm-hmm.
he grew up with a completely different sort of experience, but I was able to sort of get from both of them some of these things where I could see different perspectives and appreciate different things. So I could appreciate minority culture
Mm-hmm.
on both sides. I can appreciate different philosophies, and I think that's where when I travel, I really travel from a position of curiosity.
Right.
So rather than seeing anything and judging it, just being curious, especially the things that I don't like why would someone live this way, or why is someone this way, or why is this culture this way? Instead of
Mm-hmm.
just judging it, just approach it from curiosity. And it's interesting. You learn so much more about just people, and you can start putting yourself in their situation and see how different your perspective on the world would be if you had their lived experience.
Yeah, I can definitely relate because you know this, but a lot of people don't. I traveled a lot, lived in different countries. The twins were born in South Africa, and that was a very different experience. But I take a similar mindset to you. You know, I really want my children to have those rich experiences because I think they shape a person, they shape your life. And I think it's especially important, the three of them having autism and one of them being non speaking, it makes me push it more because I realize they, by the nature of their diagnosis, might be pushed as a little bit more of an outlier or an outsider. And so, right now, being young, we're in that experimental period where we're trying to figure out what's your skill set, what do you like, what do you not like. But I think, my background of travel has really sparked an interest in parenting in a very different way, and you seem to share that.
Yeah, well, you see it. I mean, this is back to that appreciation. So leading with curiosity instead of judgment, being in these different cultures, it's very easy for us to come from a North American culture and be like, well, we have so much more. These people don't.
Mm-hmm.
But if you lead from curiosity, you start noticing how big family and community is
Mm-hmm.
in other countries where it doesn't have, it's not as big a thing typically in North America. So you see that, or even the freedom that, different cultures give their kids and what they're
Mm-hmm.
capable of. So all these things, you definitely do start getting appreciation for different ways to parent, how it raises, a child, and those experiences, and seeing them just learn those things. And what I'll say is a common thing I'll hear from parents who maybe haven't done some big travel is that they want to wait till their kids are a little older so they can appreciate it. And there's some truth in that. Like their memories will be better the older they are. But the impact of some of these experiences, and especially if you don't force the impact. So if you
Mm-hmm.
do go on these trips, the thing that's going to have an impact on your kids isn't going to be what you think. It's not going to be, necessarily the flight or seeing the Eiffel Tower
Mm-hmm.
or the expensive things that you do, like, spending a lot on a park or food or something else. It's going to be this small little micro moment that you wouldn't even expect, but stick with them and shape them. So
Like someone putting a blanket over you.
like someone putting a blanket over you.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So that's a thing. And that's where I do hear parents like, well, we did this thing and they didn't even care. Well, of course they didn't care. They didn't even know what it was
Mm-hmm.
or why it was important to you. but it doesn't mean the trip wasn't a success or there wasn't something else they didn't love. And I think that's the thing, is just letting go a little bit about the outcome of what will have an impact. It's there. My younger son, I remember this is before he even went to school. So he would have been pre-kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always interested in buildings, but at that time, like, he was really excited. That was his thing. And we went to New York and just seeing like the Statue of Liberty and all these towers and skyscrapers. He still loves that, wants to be an architect, and is fascinated by buildings. Now, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if that would have just been inherently in him anyways, which it could have been, but I do know that that trip at that young age did definitely have a lasting impact. Whereas now, like, he was so young, he doesn't remember all the details, but I
Mm-hmm.
see the impact that it had on him even now today.
Well, I do think there's something different about hearing and seeing. And, I think the more you travel, the less pictures you take, the more mental pictures you take, because they are lasting. And I'm seeing that with my kids now too, just in tiny moments. I would agree with you in some aspects. I wish I would have traveled a bit more. Like, I started out with my first one traveling a lot. And then I'm one person, so I was outnumbered. And I was like, okay, I need to slow down a bit. I did travel with all three of them for a period of time. And then once they started to run around a bit, it was like chasing a school of cats. So I was like, right, we need to slow down a bit. Now I think we're re-entering that travel phase, because now they're starting to learn better skills. One thing that I like that I've pretty successfully done with my children thus far is convincing them that they're a team. And I'm like, right,
Mm-hmm.
if one of you runs off, the other ones need to catch him. You all need to stay together. You all need to hold hands. And then it brings me back to other cultures, just in my personal travel, where, in France, it's very common for all the preschoolers to be holding hands or be connected in some way. And they're walking them around and they're doing things. And I think that in North America, we can learn a lot from some of these cultures, like especially the Japanese culture, for example. Very clean, very organized, have a lot of respect. If we don't force, you can't really make someone have the travel bug, but if you start early, I think it does inject something into someone. And once that travel bug bites you, it doesn't matter like what background you have. I think it's unstoppable.
For sure. And I think what holds people back a lot is, the safety and the security. Like, travel is uncomfortable, or
Mm-hmm.
can be. But for me, that's the whole reason I do travel, is to be outside of my comfort zone, to experience new things, to change the way I think, or change my perspective. So yeah, I definitely see that. And I love that you got your kids holding their hands, because that's something as well. Like, my guys, they fight, like, they don't get along that well. But when we're traveling, that bond deepens. They look out for each other, especially
Mm-hmm.
when we were in India. Like, it was
Mm-hmm.
dangerous. We were in some pretty crazy spots. Like I
Sure.
said, we were in it, and they're both worried for each other and looking out for each other. And they won't necessarily admit it now, but
Mm-hmm.
it was there. And I love that it does create a closer bond. And from that trip, and we've done many trips, but that one was interesting because we did all get pushed so hard that our relationship changed and shifted through that, because we were in it. We were in the thick of it. We could, we were uncomfortable at
Mm-hmm.
times, or sick or tired. And just seeing how people are at their worst when they're pushed is
Mm-hmm.
really interesting. And seeing how you come together at that same time is interesting. And I'm sure, like your guys, if one runs, another one catches them, they probably feel like a hero, and
Mm.
like, really part of that team. And it is that autonomy and feeling like you can make a difference. And it's something so small, but not.
Well, I think it's about just striking that fine balance between independence and experimentation. It's like I really have tried not to put any sort of leash system on my children. I tried really hard because I do have a runner, Koa, he's fast, super fast. I think I've kind of gotten him to a point now where I give him just enough freedom where then he gets curious where mommy is. And that's
Mm,
healthy because I think those type of experiences like you're talking about, that builds grit. And I think you can do that in any child. So
yeah.
what's the feedback from your children after you guys came back from India regarding that type of stuff?
It varied, but what I love, so some feedback I love from my youngest, because they're honest, and this was last summer, so he would have been like 12,
Mhm,
and he just, it was such a hard trip. He's like, why would we do that? Why would we go there? Like, we were there for 3 weeks. We were in the
mhm,
north, the south. We drove across the country. We were in, little towns and areas where like we didn't see anyone that wasn't a local. It
mhm.
was just locals. And India's crowded and packed full of people. And
Right.
we've got friends that, have gone back to India and they're like, they cannot believe the stuff we did.
Mhm,
And so, you could just see him like, and they're in middle school age. So always sort of trying to, you know, tease their dad and push things. He's like, I can't believe we did that. Like, that was so stupid. Like, why would we even do that? And then I, talked to him about, well, how he felt afterwards. Cause he actually was the hero of the trip in terms of like resilience and how well he managed all the stuff, and just talked about like how that felt
mhm,
and how much different he feels and things. He's like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, there was that. And you could
mhm,
see him like in all these other trips, like we could go to Disneyland a million times
mhm.
and, and have a fun time.
Right.
But those memories don't stick the same way, or they don't change you the same way. And the reason I love that is because he was you know, trying to think of reasons why we shouldn't travel almost.
Mhm,
And at the end of the day, even a 13-year-old can see like, oh, I'm a different person because of this. I'm
mhm.
like, yeah. And I said, no, all the trips don't have to be like that. But
Right.
there is some power in something like that. And they see it now. And also they're not fearful of anything. They'll do anything now
After that trip.
after that trip. I mean, even
Uh-huh.
before they do a bit, but after that, Ladakh where we were, I mean, it's a war zone. You can't go there now. And even when we
Mhm,
were there, it was a ceasefire, but
mhm,
it's a dangerous part of the world.
mhm,
And even the altitude, like we cleared passes that were almost as high as Everest Base Camp.
mhm.
So it was pretty incredible. And then other parts of the India, just as incredible. Some of the stuff we saw, and the crowds, the heat, the food, and
Well,
so
let's
yeah,
talk a little bit
everything
more
feels
about
easy.
that because, I think talking about these type of experiences actually encourages travel. It encourages that independent mindset. Like, let's highlight some of that stuff that you guys did that you think that was so special. All the tiny things.
Well, we did. So I'll mention the highlights. So for me, the highlights were Ladakh, and sort of being in this, because we were walking, there's no roads in the middle
Hmm.
of nowhere, and then seeing this tall mountain and hiking up this mountain. Like, it was just a small little mountain by itself,
Hmm.
but a good, half hour, 40-minute hike just to the summit. And the
Hmm.
top was just like a small little temple. And inside the temple was just like a single monk doing morning prayer by himself.
Hmm.
And it's just so magical. Nobody's around. He wasn't there to perform for anyone. He didn't
Hmm.
stop when we showed up. He was just doing his thing. And it felt so amazing. And that was one of my highlights. But like my older son, he loved being in the south where we were in Kerala, and we were on these small little boats uh, going down the waterways, and it sort of had like this jungle feel, and you'd be going by, homes that had no road access to them, and people
Hmm.
be, washing their clothes in the river and just, or setting out fishing lines and just going through these quiet little riverways. And that's if they travel, is by boat. He loved that. Like, that was his Zen moment. And then my youngest, again, like I mentioned, the buildings and architecture, there's some stuff there that's just incredible. Like, Taj Mahal for sure, like the beauty of it when you see it in person, you can really appreciate like, yes, I see why this is such a big deal. But we saw these other temples that like one that was completely carved out of the rock. So it was, it
Hmm.
wasn't built, it was carved out. It was this big, amazing thing. Or another one where the structure, they don't even know how they got the stone on the top of this thing. Today, they don't know. It baffles them, just the
Hmm.
weight and the size and the detail. And so we saw some of those things that, weren't the Taj Mahal, that are even more incredible in their own ways. And yeah, those things sort of stick with you. Like it's hard to not see things that are that different and that special and not bring that home with you and look at the world a little differently when you see stuff.
Hmm. Well, I love that you mentioned that your younger one was the hero of the story, because I think that ties in really well to your book. Because if I remember correctly on the cover, don't you have a young man that's kind of atop a mountain? And that seems to really reflect your trip to India for me, the more and more you talk about it.
For sure, it was funny. It was almost like that, and the book manifested the trip in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
which was really interesting. And yeah, there's one time where we were just, the altitude was just too much. Like it
Hmm.
was, like you could feel yourself nauseous and with headaches and just every step was difficult. And so me and my older son sort of stopped and waited and just rested. My
Hmm.
younger one is the one who ran up to the summit and saw a summit we never even made it to.
Hmm.
And just that, like he still has a bit more bounce in his step, a little bit more confidence. He's the younger one. So he's always the
Hmm.
one, he's always like, oh, he can't keep up. He can't do anything.
Yeah.
Like he's always trying to be, keep up with his brother. Well, in that situation, he was able to do what his brother couldn't.
Hmm.
And that's sort of a neat experience that I think is stuck with both. Like it brought some humility to the older one and, a little bit more confidence and pride to the younger one, which is really cool.
And how do you think that experience brought back like more community involvement in your children?
I think,
Because I imagine that they're different in multiple ways now. Because I think it's like, uncorking a bottle. Like, you can't put that cork back in once you've done something like that. So how do you think that's rippled through your community?
yeah. So, and this would be, it's from all that travel. They, they're very inviting of people and not judgmental because they've seen and spent time with so many different people and cultures and ways of being. So if you think of like their middle school and high school where everything's catty and,
Mhm.
everybody's judging, they really don't because like it just doesn't matter. Like those things, if you're accepting and if you see the beauty in the world and beauty in people, it's really hard to just like, oh, that's the wrong club or the wrong group or they're not cool.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
really difficult. So they both have very large and diverse friend groups because of it. They're not in specific cliques. They like people. They're social. Like they have no problem, greeting a stranger or walking by a homeless person and talking to them. And,
Mhm.
like all of these things, it just opened their eyes to just not being judgmental, really. I think the thing is that, and that's for adults as well. The more you travel, it's really hard to judge when you start seeing the variety in the world.
Well, I mean, I think those hard moments humanize you because, you know, oftentimes, even just language, if you put yourself in a position where maybe you only speak English and then you go to a country where English is not that dominant language, and then you have to relearn, you have to find a way to communicate. You know, you can't always just pull out your phone and type in Google Translate and figure it out. Like you are then forced into an uncomfortable position, like you say, to learn the hard things. And, like you said, humbles us. And I think you kind of reach a different stage of enlightenment that way that's necessary for human development.
For sure. Yeah, I do love that. Like learning how to communicate without language, you do start connecting, especially like we talked about being, slightly autistic. It's really cool to see, a child forced to, connect that way. And in some ways, it's easier for them because,
Mm-hmm.
Our autistic children probably don't have, like language is not one of their strengths,
Mm-hmm.
but just like physical connection can be like, that's, they're very quick to know who likes them, who doesn't, who's
Mm-hmm.
authentic, who's not.
Mm-hmm.
Like they can read those subtle cues and things that aren't genuine will just hit them, and it's interesting because not knowing the language heightens all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think my children kind of have spidey senses that way, because
Mm-hmm.
especially Koa, like he's the one that doesn't really have language, or his language is very limited. He's now starting to use an AAC device, which obviously at home, you fall into normal patterns of drag mommy around and pointing. But when I push him hard enough, then every once in a while a word pops out and I'm like, oh, I wasn't aware you knew that word. So I think that we're not doing our children any favors by making things too easy, even if they are autistic, because you push them a little bit and then you find out what they're capable of.
Mm-hmm. You definitely do. And the more they can accomplish, the more proud they are. Like they want to
Mm-hmm.
feel capable. They want to feel like they could do stuff. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
wants to feel like they can't do anything.
Right.
Yeah. So
Well, I
yeah,
think it's amazing. That trip, I was so excited for you guys, and I was hoping it would work out. And I remember telling you, like, if you get the opportunity, like, sleep in the dirt, like, make those kids live that gritty lifestyle, and they'll be so appreciative. So I was happy to hear the feedback that, you guys really went for it.
yeah. No, we were definitely sleeping in the dirt and booking, places to stay that, the night before. Like we didn't know what we were doing, where we were going, and just went with it. And that was fun too for them. So they could see, you don't need a plan. You don't need to know everything. And sometimes it didn't work out. And that's also part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so even looking at like, we can reflect on like what we would have done differently, what didn't work out, what didn't go as planned, what was a surprise, like all those things. And that's the beauty of it is. And then, so another thing, like you're talking like that, resilience and grit, that like curveballs thrown their way aren't a big deal
Mm-hmm.
because they've lived it. They've lived with, no running water or a cold
Mm-hmm.
shower when they had it, or,
Mm-hmm.
no, food they hated,
Mm-hmm.
or were tired of, or that made them sick. And,
Right.
and they managed.
So where's your next trip? Where else have you guys been since we last talked?
Well, the next big one, I try to do a big trip every summer. So that was last summer.
Mm-hmm.
And next week we're going to Japan. So that'll be,
Nice.
yeah, not
Are
as
you
not
going
as
to
much
do the
hardship,
whole island, or just a few places?
just a few places. We've got some distant family there, so we're going to see them in Hokkaido. So we're going to spend about a week in Hokkaido, and then there's a pilgrimage trail, Buddhist pilgrimage trail, south of Osaka that we're going to do. We'll do about a week doing that. That'll be, again, a little bit grittier. We'll be, backpacking and sleeping in small little ryokans and
Mm-hmm.
onsen towns. And then we'll do a week in Tokyo, essentially. So,
Right. So we're covering the Japanese section of things. What are your experiences with the indigenous community that your kids are getting to experience?
that's still sort of new. Like I think we talked about that before, where
Mm-hmm.
a lot of this, there's so much um, shame around a lot of those communities, and that was what was taught. So, like my dad, for example, he wasn't in touch with the community at all, and there was a lot of shame and judgment towards that community,
Mm-hmm.
and he he prided himself in being removed from it, and So this is something where for my boys, like I want to start, I want them to have more of an appreciation for it. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I've been sort of trying to get more in touch and, you know, spend more time with people in the community and
Mm-hmm.
also appreciating some of the beauty that's come out of it and just
Mm-hmm.
recognize that that is their heritage. So it's a little trickier though, because I don't have, as close to links. My dad's no longer around.
Mm-hmm.
His parents are, gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's trying to just reintroduce that. But it is really cool to see them start to take pride in that side of their heritage, whereas I grew up not having that.
Mm-hmm. So, what First Nation was your father from, if you don't mind me asking?
So in I live in Canada on the West
Right.
Coast, and so we have the Haida, and
Mm-hmm.
so my family would have been from uh, uh, the sort of interior. There's a
Mm-hmm.
Tecumseh band
Okay.
near Kamloops in BC, and my aunt is there, so there's a little bit of connection still there. So
Okay.
that's the band that my kids and myself would be part of, and yeah,
So you do kind of
and
have an in through your aunt that, you know, you're not completely walking blind.
not completely walking by blind, but
That's good.
you know, I see like it's not a really close relationship with my aunt,
Yeah.
in terms of how often we'll communicate or talk, see each
Mm-hmm.
other. So yeah, so I'm slowly trying to, increase that, and that'd be a good trip for us to go visit and
Mm-hmm.
see her and spend some time as well and do that. And if you've
Well,
ever seen
there's,
Haida art, like it's amazing. Yeah,
I've not been
beautiful.
up to that section yet, but, there's a lot going on right now with the Indigenous communities. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because I feel like, now's a perfect time to, show advocacy for different groups. I've been trying to follow as closely as I can. And, yeah, if your children have that connection, then they're part of that seventh generation that is supposed to bring back everything. And I'm seeing that a lot with advocacy in different areas for the land and for the water. And recently, I'm gonna pull out my list because I did a little research. I can't remember all of it, but let's see here. Right. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but California just returned 73 square miles and 47,000 acres of ancestral land back to the Yurok tribe. And
Oh wow.
so, yeah, like they're working on the rivers. I think they broke down a dam and like repopulating salmon and all of that sort of thing. So, your children right now are at a really impressionable age that reintroduce it or rematriating them back into that culture. We just don't know where that may lead. They may be part of the next evolution of advocates.
For sure. And it is interesting to see it evolve. Uh, and I think it is just so complicated because I don't think people fully appreciate as well. Like because some of these societies were just so effectively dismantled, you
Mm-hmm.
don't have, the capacity or the mentors or the people. And that's where it's easy for people to quickly judge. But
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like trying to refine. It's like we don't have necessarily the people that, oh, I remember this way, I can show it to
Right.
you. No, we're trying to uncover it and rediscover it. And that's a lot more complicated and isn't as easy, and trying to recover what's been lost versus, pass on what's known.
Mm-hmm.
Two very different things. And definitely it will be interesting to start seeing that shift. And yeah, I feel like there's a lot of change that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's such a delicate state that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, hard to know which direction things will go. And it's that careful balance of like
Mm-hmm.
reinventing yourself, but also holding on to old traditions.
Well, I'm an advocate in most senses, as we've talked about, advocacy is in the name of the podcast for a reason. And yeah, I find it interesting because I feel like, the indigenous tribes are the original stewards of the land, and who better to really move us in a positive direction as far as conservation than them, because they know. And even if there's a process of rediscovering, I think I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope. And I think if some of the governments would get a little bit more on board with supporting them, I think they could do amazing things in the environmental arena. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear your perspective on Canada, because right now I'm in the US. We've got a whole host of problems going on down here. So what's going on up in Canada?
I mean, Canada's tricky as well. Like we've basically, which is a big deal, acknowledged, all the rights,
Mm-hmm.
but haven't really said what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. It's really tricky. We have to do like a land acknowledgement,
Mm-hmm.
but all it is an acknowledgement, and there's actually nothing behind the words.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of a tricky spot to be in, and no one's really willing, because it comes down to cost and political willpower for a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know how to play out, but there's definitely been a lot of change, which has been positive.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in the same way, things that are holding us back. So I don't know, but yeah, I find it's one of those things that's once you start really digging into it, it's so much more complicated than we think.
Yeah.
And we have a tendency to want to just throw resources and money at something.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're more complicated issues, like there's a lot more nuance. And a lot of it's shifting mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's rarely talked about, but that's probably more important than anything is, if you like I said, like you and myself, like grew up in a family where, we didn't have the pride and,
Mm-hmm.
Trying to change beliefs after multiple generations of oppression. I think that's the thing, is you almost have to start with, the beliefs and mindset first. And that's a lot trickier to achieve.
Well, it seems like there's some good pockets of things going on, and there's a really interesting project that's been going on in northern Indiana for a while, where they have a big nature preserve that they're raising buffalo, and then they're rematriating the buffalo back to the different tribes. And so I'm watching all these things, these little pockets of goodness that are starting things that seem like they will, if followed through with, will have a positive and lasting effect.
Yes. No, I'm hopeful as well. So yeah, be very cool to see some of that happen.
Well, Canada, you guys are doing a heck of a lot better than us, just in all areas, just in general. So I'm curious to see, like, what do you think that Canada's doing really well right now?
Canada's doing really well. It's hard. I'm in it, so I don't.
Well, we can talk about
Yeah.
anything, because honestly, about any country's doing better than mine.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there is. Well, and what's sad is there is a lot of, hatred towards the U.S. and it sort of sucks. I think it's not always, like, it's not warranted, but it's easy to sort of look at one person or one issue and sort of paint with a broad brush. So it's, if anything, I find myself defending the U.S. more than not. And again, not because of anything specific that that I feel is good that's happening. It's more just approaching things again with curiosity of like what, it's so much easier to just, be angry at everything that's
Mm,
going on, but just trying to like, if I put that aside, you know, is this, just start asking the questions. Is this everyone? Does everyone believe this? Is this, oh, so yeah, so it is interesting, but back to that. So what Canada does well in general, and probably, what I notice is some major difference is in general, Canadians think as a collective, the greater good
hmm
community, not like individual rights are rarely supersede those of the community, even in
mm,
personal beliefs. And so you'll see that. So Canadians sort of rally, even when it might
hmm
hurt themselves personally, if it's good for the community. And a lot of countries do that,
hmm
but that's something that's sort of baked in the American, just the formula of America to begin with was, you can't tell me what to do. My individual rights are more important than, the monarchs.
hmm
And so it's sort of baked in. And that flavors a lot more than I think people realize. So we can focus on all the specific issues, but I feel like that fundamental mindset, and that's why I mention mindset so
hmm
often, is everything comes from that. So if everything's under the perspective of what's good for the individual versus what's good for the community, it's going to change everything.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit more about Canada because, see, I'm familiar with different things because I have different friend groups than some other people, and I have traveled a lot. But for those that have not traveled a lot, that may be listening to this podcast, I think it would be really interesting for them to hear the differences in, say, how a person's life would be set up in Canada when we're talking about comparisons as far as, you know, healthcare, access to food, impoverished groups, indigenous nations. Like there are lots of things that are similarities that really these boundary lines are sort of imaginary because we're almost like cousins. That's kind of how I see it. I kind of see like Canada and Mexico as kind of being like cousins of the US because we've always been traveling back and forth. And, you know, this sense of nationalism and rugged individualism and, all of the others, when you get into all of the others, then the other can also be you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would be really interesting for people to hear more about your experience, like born and raised in Canada and having access to universal health care and all these sorts of things and the benefits that you think that you have in Canada that would differ from the US.
Yeah, I mean, healthcare is an obvious one. You mentioned it. It's it's so foreign for a Canadian to imagine that if someone was hurt or sick or injured, that could completely devastate and bankrupt the family. And
hmm
that doesn't exist. And, you're hurt, you go to the hospital.
hmm
And, you're injured, you go to the hospital. You get cancer, you go to the hospital. Like it's not, it doesn't even cross our minds, almost to a detriment. Because when we travel, some of that insurance doesn't travel with us.
Right.
But a lot of Canadians will travel without health insurance because we don't even think about health insurance.
hmm
And and then we hear these horror stories of, oh, someone got injured in the States and something happened and they're in an accident
hmm
and here's their hospital bill and Canada's not covering it because they didn't have health insurance and they were out of country.
hmm
That's shocking to us as Canadians because we don't experience that. Whereas it's, common every day in the US, which is crazy. Definitely traveling. There's like Canadians are patient and soft. And so that's the way we speak. So I don't see a lot of A's like some Canadians, but it's implied in how I talk. because there's going to be a question. If I ask, you know, something simple, like even a comment on the weather, it'll probably be a question. It seems sunny today. Like there'll be a question implied. There's just a softness. There's sort of an invitation. So I notice it. Like when we're traveling, nobody waits for a Canadian and lets them go in front of them. But Canadians are always the ones, you know, at the back of a line letting people go because it's just in our nature. So those would be some differences that are big. And then like the personal freedom's a big one where we don't hold on to it as strongly. So like there's just a difference. Like guns, it's not so much that there aren't Canadians that don't have guns, or we've got hunters, but most Canadians wouldn't see a gun as a form of defense. You just wouldn't. Like I don't feel safer with a gun. My friends who have guns, it would be for, you know, as a hobby or for hunting, not for self-defense. And it's just interesting. I think there's a lot more, there's more fear in other societies, or definitely in the US than Canada. Like I leave my front door open and I don't think about it. I don't worry about traveling with a gun because I can defend myself. I feel like my wits and my, you know, everything else, like that's what's going to protect me, not a weapon. You know, say like I don't sleep with a bat by my bed, or anyone who does. So there's just little subtle things. And it's interesting because we watch the majority of our pulp culture is American. So culturally, we're very similar, or very in tune. Most or most Canadians would know more about your president than our prime minister. Most like it would be rare for a Canadian to not know who the president of the US is. Not so rare to not know who the prime minister is. Like it's just, we're baked in your culture. We watch your news, we watch your shows, we wear your clothes, we listen to your music. And then yet there's these small differences that a lot of times they sort of pop up out of nowhere, where if you haven't traveled or you don't have a lot of friends cross border, you're shocked that some conversations will go in the direction they do.
Well, let's speak a little bit about travel, because, you know, both of us have traveled a lot. And something that raises some alarm bells for me right now and makes me nervous because I have traveled so much are, you know, like the increased military presence, obviously, you know, military and ICE members with, you know, facial coverings, people being stopped more regularly to present documents and things of that nature. That was not happening before, and it seems to like rapidly be becoming the norm. I know you have the Mounties up north, so you'll have to correct me on, you know, all of the political language, but I know you guys also have your equivalent of border control. Can you speak a little bit about how that works for you guys up there? Like when you're driving your car, you know, when you're crossing into different provinces, like what does the police force look like up there, and how do they handle the civilian population?
Well, I mean, we usually don't think like even that. We probably just say police. We wouldn't say police force. You know, we don't have assault rifles, not that I'm aware of anyway. So it's just the presence. Like, yeah, our police have guns, but they don't feel like a force or a military force. But I will say I have been traveling quite a bit back and forth to the US, and I haven't noticed a personal difference. Luckily, there's definitely less travel between Canada and the US. That's definitely down. But in terms of me having a hard time going through or being treated differently, I haven't really felt that. But again, I might not look like the people they're targeting. So, so there is that. So yeah, so I don't, yeah, there's a difference, but it's a subtle difference. If you're not paying attention, you won't maybe notice the difference.
So there hasn't been an uptick on anything sort of related to our changes in Canada. Like Canada's police is not behaving in a similar fashion to what you see on the news is happening in the US.
No, we probably wouldn't have that. We wouldn't
And
have that change.
why do you think that is?
Fear, probably. Like there's a lot of fear in the US and you feel it. Like you can feel it in areas. Like there's and maybe it's even just so here's another thing that is subtle. And again, this is just my own perspective. So it doesn't mean it's true, but I notice like if I'm in the US, most groups stick together. So your religious groups, your ethnic groups, like there is all that diversity in the US, but not amongst groups. Whereas in Canada, it's much more common to have mixed race groups or, and again, we still have like our tight communities and like, they're all going to be pretty tight and have their own things, but like they also blend, like there's a lot of blending. And I think in that blending, there's less fear. Like if I saw, you know, a whole bunch of the other approaching me on the street, I'm going to be scared. But if I don't see them as the other, because I've got friends that are just like those people, I'm not going to be scared. And I think that's the thing is there is a lot of fear in the US. You can feel it. There's an underlying fear and anxiety that again is subtle, but it probably makes a big difference.
Well, since we're speaking about things that are fearful, you know, I think the female population and the LGBTQ, especially the trans population, would be very fearful right now. Can you speak on, say, the collective Canadian mindset when it comes to specific issues like that? I know that there was a period of time where you had a little bit more conservative person that seemed like they were going to take a very high level of office. And then after our president got elected, that shifted in Canada. And it seemed like it was a big shift. So maybe you can speak about those type of things and, you know, how that reflection is particularly Canadian.
Yeah, I mean, so another thing we haven't talked much about is, you know, church and religion. And that's stronger in the US as well. Like we definitely, like we don't have, from what I've experienced anyway, as strong a tie to it. So our views on things like homosexuality or the LGBTQ community, it's going to be flavored just with your personal preference, not because of doctrine. And so it softens it because it's less about, you know, you can be a little bit more curious around it. It's not so black and white. And so a lot of that stuff, there's always the fear that, you know, we'll go so far socially right that we'll start resembling the US. And we've seen a bit of that just in the rise of populism in general. But I don't personally feel that fearful of it. Like I don't like it's those issues don't feel like, it doesn't feel like there's enough people fighting for hard social right. Like most Canadians don't really care. Like not care in the sense of like those issues aren't important, but just there's not enough like there's not enough drive towards, you know, anti-abortion or anti-gay rights or these things that I think a lot of times are driven by the church. And I think the values of religion, like I try to live a lot of the values and virtues, but the actual establishment can create doctrine that really polarizes. And the problem with that is there's not an argument against it. Like if it's a belief you have, and a core belief, and a belief not because it's something you just read, you just thought of yourself, but actually you think like this, you're damned, and
Mm.
this is a core belief. There's no middle ground. There's no understanding. You can't talk that through. And so I think it really creates these camps where there can't be a middle ground, because it's like fundamental core beliefs that are against who you are as a person on both
Mm-hmm.
sides.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which just sucks, because again, I think curiosity, talking about people, learning, it just softens all of it. So I mean, I mean, and again, I'm on the West Coast, so it's pretty liberal anyway.
Mm.
And I'm on an island, which is even more liberal. So like, I don't see a lot of that. My kids go to school, and that's, I mean, like, it wouldn't even cross their mind that it would be something they should be concerned about, or could be a problem, that someone's, yeah, someone's sexual preference is different than theirs. Like, they're non-issues to them. It blows their mind that people have issue with it.
So you guys don't really have a bunch of mega churches in Canada like we do here, then maybe.
No, no. And I've experienced some of those. I mean, I've gone to, you know, LA, and gone to like the mega church and watched like a nativity show,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just
Mm-hmm.
crazy. And we also I don't think we have any televangelists either. I don't think that's a Canadian thing. So yeah, it's not a thing.
So would you know then? I'm just curious because in the U.S., most churches get tax-free status, and so these mega churches can really bring in the dough. Um, do you know if Canada has a similar like tax structure for churches that would also allow that?
Yeah, definitely there's tax benefits, for sure. So that exists. But again, I don't know. Canada doesn't take things. We don't take business to the same extreme necessarily as, well, from what I've seen. Like, it's just I can't imagine a mega church here. I
So it's
mean,
more
probably.
cultural for you guys that potentially you as a populace are really adhering more to what you think your social and moral code should be as a nation. And that would supersede the structure of varied churches potentially.
I think so. And again,
Mm,
there's going to be different places where,
sure.
that it's stronger, and it's more ingrained. But yeah, and even with like religion, like, well, so I wouldn't know the religious affiliation of my friend group.
Mm,
No, it's not secretive. If I asked, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm a Christian, or I'm Anglican, or I'm like," but it's
hmm
not. It's not something that's so important that I actually know it. In the same way, I don't know how much everybody earns, or what they spent on their house, or
hmm
there's, if I really asked, they would tell me, and it's not out of respect. It's just, it doesn't really matter too much.
Mm. See, I find that interesting because I think there are pockets in the US that would have a similar viewpoint, but these groups of people would be seen more as like hippies. They'd be like, oh, well, yeah, that's so easy. Just care about everybody else. But, uh, you know, we're made to work and we have to work until we die. And, there are all these people that are telling us all these things. And if they tell us that, then that must be true and that must be gospel. So I'm also curious to have these types of conversations. I think they're important, especially right now, because, the US is just being flooded with, I think, misinformation. And, our news is also problematic right now. So to have a conversation like this, like in between people, can highlight what's good and what's not, and kind of maybe refocus or recenter people, because I think there is a lot of fear right now. And I think it's, other countries obviously are affected by what's going on in the US. But yeah, the level of fear of just your average citizen, or denial in that fact too. There are those that probably feel completely comfortable and everything seems normal, even though, you could blink your eyes and 6 months has passed, not 20 years. So anyway, that's why I'm asking you these questions, because I think there's so much information that's being flung around right now that it's hard to find the truth, and it's hard to find community. It's hard to find like good lasting relationships for people to navigate, who they can trust, who's safe, who's not. And that's a real problem right now in the US. I think, these are very important conversations to have to find balance.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, there's just there's an edge to a lot of these things. Like I know when I'm in the US, if I'm hanging out with people who go to church every day or every Sunday, they'll look at me differently. And
Mm-hmm.
they don't think that's good that I don't. They'll hang out, they'll still be a friend, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a mark against me. And I just find that fascinating, because I actually abide by most Christian values and the way I live I have a pretty strong moral code.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I don't go to church isn't because I don't believe in religion or even a God. It's I lean from curiosity. So that's the exact opposite of faith. I'm questioning everything always. So it doesn't allow for an absolute answer. But I I find it interesting, whereas like my friends in Canada, I've got friends who go to church religiously and friends who
Mm-hmm.
don't, and it 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 really doesn't factor in, because we sort of see who the person is. If you
Mm-hmm.
go to church and you're sinning all the time, or you don't go to church and you're, a saint, like
Mm-hmm.
that's what's important. And there's not a lot of pushing personal identity onto other people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting, and all these little things, and yeah, and I don't know. I mean, some of it's just like I said, that independence from the forming of the states, but it's just I don't. It really is fascinating, because it isn't as important. Like no, like people won't look at me differently because of my
Mm-hmm.
religious affiliation. I haven't encountered much of my religious
Yeah.
affiliation in Canada. I definitely know it in the US.
Well, I find it interesting because I also feel like I have a strong moral code. I try and be a decent person. I was going to church and then recently stopped. And curiously enough, I think it's because of my moral code, which would sound really strange to other people. But, you know, I was one of those kids that went to church like 3 times a week. I was in fellowship with Christian athletes. I used to lead choir, did the whole thing. And then I ended up being gay. So, you know, there was a line there. And then I tried to go back to church, like off and on over the years in different places around the world and things like that. And what I just kind of consistently noticed, at least in like the Christian churches that I went to, it was sort of like this. You can be a sinner, you can be a prostitute, you can be a drug addict or whatever. But if you're gay, you're out. Like, we can absolve you. You could be smoking crack and whatever else behind the diner with whomever. And the minute you walk in that church, if you confess your sins and you're absolved and you change your lifestyle, then you're holy and you're good to go. And no more sin. You're fine. You have permission to be a hypocrite, a bigot, whatever. as long as you're in the church, and all of that is absolved. But the minute that you're different, or the minute that you stand up for somebody else and follow a moral compass, especially if you stand up and say, I disagree, I think you're wrong, I don't think that that follows the teachings of Christ, you will get that door shut in your face faster than anything. And I just find that interesting. And so, yeah, I'm curious about the Canadian perspective, because right now, I think that was about my last try with church. I don't think that that's a reflection of, my moral compass or my religious beliefs, but I'll just be really frank. Like right now, especially because I have children, I'm an example to them. And, in some ways, they kind of have the deck stacked against them, with navigating the world with autism and all that. So I have to be really careful who I put them in front of, because I want to make sure that I'm providing them experiences and putting them in front of people that are decent people, that are safe, that they can learn skills from. And if you just want to talk about maybe just your time in general, like there's so many hours in a day. And I think I've just reached that point in my life where I'm like, right, like this is a waste of my time. I've put in enough energy. It's sort of like reinventing the wheel. I was like, hey, I don't hate you guys for it. Everybody has an opinion about things. I respect your opinion. But now I think I've seen enough, and I think my time will be spent better elsewhere, because I'm of that mindset and I like history and all that. So I know that Jesus was brown. I don't need to have someone tell me, oh, hey, here's this white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus, because that's more convenient for you. No, I know he was brown. I know he was from the Middle East. I know that he practiced love. I know he, stood up for the little guy and surrounded himself with a mix of people, including women. There's just a lot of stuff right now happening in the U.S. that I feel like if Jesus was around in a lot of these churches, if he knocked on their door, they wouldn't let him in. They'd kick him out, because he, would be looking like a poor, brown beggar person. And they'd probably call ICE on him, to be honest. And I'm just curious, like, from the Canadian perspective, what you think about that?
Well, I find it a little sad, because I think religion in general, there's so much good in just what every religion
Right.
teaches. And then it gets corrupted by, man, essentially, and, used as a system for oppression. But that loses the actual teachings. And so if you can approach religion without being like, it's bad because I don't like the church, and instead just like, what's it teach? What's it say? What is this moral code and the morality? And then if you can do that, and then you start looking at all religions, you start seeing, like when it comes down to it, we all sort of believe in the same things.
Right.
Kindness, generosity, humility, all these things. And then you can actually start really understanding yourself and people better. But if you look at it with a very narrow lens, then you get the things like, oh, you're not accepted into this church, or you don't have it starts getting judgmental. I don't think religion ever started, any of the religions, as judgmental. And I think that's just over time, people want an identity, and they want an us versus them, and they want the other, and they want to feel good about their choices. And so that the more I can put myself in a silo, and everyone outside that silo is not good, and everyone in is, it makes it easier if you're insecure. But if you're open and curious and you start looking around, that's the thing is, so I think so many issues in the US that are religious based are bad issues. They're bad, there are these standpoints that are, oppressing or against people and And what's highlighted is not the good issues, which would be amazing.
Well,
Like if more effort was put into that.
I've got a big one right now that's really been weighing on my mind and my heart lately. You know, I traveled to Israel quite a bit and liked it, have friends there and things of that nature. And I've been watching this issue evolve, and now I feel like I have enough information to, for me personally, to be able to make a solid stance on what I think now. And all I seem to be seeing, like, this is just my own personal opinion, but I look at what's going on in Gaza right now, and all I can think about is, it's not the exact same thing, but it's very similar to what happened with the indigenous communities in the U.S. It's like, let's exterminate these people. Now, there are various ways that, things came about, but yeah, I think that's kind of the spark for me, besides the obvious of, like, you can't unsee. You can't unsee those starving children and all that. And for me, with religion and all that right now, I'm like, there are things that are just wrong. And I think I've finally reached an age in my moral journey, if you will, that now, because I have children, I want to do the right thing. And with all these things going on in the US and around the world right now, I feel compelled to take a stance for things that I think are right. And I don't know if I told you this, but I think I told you I got inseminated. But the donor that I used was Jewish. And I didn't have a problem with that at the time. I don't have a problem with it now. But I'm curious, like 20 years from now, 15 years now, like depending upon what happens with Israel and Palestine, my kids, if they have the capacity to have those types of conversations, I'm going to be honest with them, and they're going to ask, and they're going to ask about their donor, and they're going to find out that, he was Jewish. And I know I'm going to be asked that question. Here's this horrible part of human history. What did you do? You were an adult then. You were alive then. Like, what were your feelings? What did you observe? Like, what moral ground did you take? And I just want to be able to tell my children, maybe I didn't understand everything. Maybe I didn't have all of the knowledge. But once I felt like I had enough to make a decision, I felt like I made an effort. Like, I made an effort to do what was right and to speak out because I thought that was important. And I did it for you guys because I'm trying to be a role model for you. So I'm just curious. Like, I know that was a lot to unpack there, but I'm curious about your opinion on some of these things as well.
So, I mean, that's a big one. Again, I keep saying it over and over again because curiosity really is so important. Like I find people are very quick to sit on one side or another of these issues without being curious. And then I'd add to that the empathy. I mean, I haven't, on both sides, if my children were harmed, I don't know how I'd act, and it's very easy to look at things, from a distance and say what's right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in it, you don't always act from a position of what's right or wrong.
Mm.
And so I think that's the thing is you combine the empathy and the curiosity and you start realizing, oh, like this isn't something that's got an easy solution or could just solve or just, and I'm not the person to do it because I don't have those lived experiences. And so for me personally, if anything, I would caution anyone who sees black and white or one side is good and one side is bad and not, the atrocities on both sides.
Right.
And the fear on both sides. I mean, that's real fear. Like
Of course.
that's, you know, that's serious. And I think a lot of the things that are happening around the world right now are just distraction from real issues like this. I mean, you know, I care less about what's happening, you know, in terms of an election and more about like, you know, people dying, wars going on around the world. And yeah, and I think it's really and I think once you start looking at things from both sides and seeing it as complex as it is, you start
Mm,
realizing, okay, to start like the solution also can't be simple. It is
right.
more nuanced. And right now there isn't an obvious solution. Like that's the thing. Like I don't know where it stops. And
Well, I think it seems, and like I said, I'm a layman. I'm not in a position of power to make these types of decisions, but, through the, nonprofit work and things like that I've done, I'm just, I've become sort of a problem solver. And so it's easier for me now to look at pockets of things that can be solved. And I'm like, right, there's lots of things that's bad, not just Gaza, around the world, but like the powers that be, the people that know that these things are going on, like what positive change can you actually make without the, bureaucracy and the red tape? Like if someone needs help and you can help, how can you do that now? How can you make sure that you provide a safe environment for people? How can you lead by example? How can you practice humanistic values? And I think that, yeah, lots of things, especially considering like diplomacy and all that, yeah, that can get tricky. But, and like I said, not just Gaza, Africa, there's lots of stuff going on. But, I was really fired up whenever the US cut off aid. And then we just recently incinerated a bunch of packets that could save babies. And like those type of decisions with bureaucracy coming like from a humanitarian standpoint, I find crippling because I'm like, there are points that there are powers that be can make a moral decision that is just a good, sound moral decision for the time. For example, like feeding children. There's not really a downside to that. Like they're not adults. They can't participate in any of the wars. They're vulnerable. You know, level 5 starvation anywhere in the world shouldn't be happening because there are governments and groups of people that have more that can prevent that. And like you said, just kind of like getting more down to the bedrock of as human beings occupying this planet together, how can we best serve one another? And I definitely think that it is not through wars or occupation or colonization or starving people or whatever. Like all of those are bad choices and they don't lead to anything but future destruction. Because like, if you want to talk about Gaza for an example, it's like, right, what are we going to do with these people? Are you really, are the world powers just going to let all of these people starve to death? Like, is that what everybody wants to see? Because we're seeing it real time. Same with in Africa. Maybe we don't see it as much because maybe they don't have as many cell phones, but people are seeing this stuff in Gaza. And I think it's just highlighting us taking a path backward that is not helpful. And in my country, I'm seeing like multiple examples of that, like women's rights, children's rights. It just seems like we're taking an unhealthy step backward, that we had actually elevated our societies and we were in the process of elevating a global society, if you will. And I don't want to say that I'm shocked. I'm a little shocked. I shouldn't be. But I guess I always thought, like, these are good things. These are good things that are happening. Like, why would we want to backslide? You're probably like much more like-minded than other people would be on these types of arguments. But Yeah, sometimes I just need to throw it out into the universe to talk to somebody else about it that seems sane.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Canadians seem very sane. I will give you guys that. Of the cultures around the world, like everybody loves Canadians. And there has to be reasons for that.
yeah, I mean, there probably is a bit more of a level-headedness, slower to judgment. Uh, yeah, less driven by little pockets because we are such a collective. Yeah. Yeah, I don't, well, and a lot of these things too, it is governments that are, it's specific people, that are driving some of these things. Like I haven't been to Gaza, but I've got
Mm-hmm.
friends that have been or have friends there or have family there.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear these stories where, you know, Palestinians and Israelis, like they had no issue with each other. They
Mm-hmm.
would go into a bar together
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't a big deal. And
Mm-hmm.
then, like when people are just people and you take everything else out of it, usually it isn't a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then we make it a problem. Um,
Right.
so, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, but but like I said, I do see people like picking sides,
Mm.
even here in Canada. And for me personally, I'm not one who likes seeing people pick sides. Um, Not because one side's better than the other, but more just the more, like, if you can't understand the other side, you can't solve it, in my opinion.
Right.
Like, you need
Right.
to understand both sides to solve a solution. And if again, it's the other, it becomes a battle, like you can't win.
I agree with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I know there was just some tough things that we spoke about, but I told you we're going to dive into some hard issues and then we're going to see what happens.
Oh, I love it. I love the catch up, and it has been a while. So it is good to go into some of these things and hear what's happening. And a lot of these conversations, I mean, I know you keep mentioning our kids because that is it. Like,
Right.
we want our kids to learn how to have conversation, how to have nuance, especially in the world they're going to live in. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be so much more information than we grew up with, that you really need to just like use your own sort of gut instinct and critical thinking
Mm-hmm.
to sort of understand and pull out and like make your own decisions,
Mm-hmm.
because I think we're going to have a lot more groupthink just in the way, just the nature of mass media. And
Mm-hmm.
as it becomes more and more prevalent, we're going to have more and more groupthink. So yeah, for my boys, anytime I hear them going like supporting something that's just like everyone supports, it's just the easy win.
Mm-hmm.
I I try to encourage, like I try to throw out just like, not against that, but just encourage them to just like go a little deeper, question a little deeper, just ask why do you believe that, or why do you think everybody believes that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a possibility everybody could be wrong, or there's more to it? And yeah, and especially, I mean, Canadians are very like I said, where I am, it's very liberal. What we say, and
Mm-hmm.
they're just easy wins. There's no one's going to argue with you. But
Mm-hmm.
and I don't, and I believe, I lean left socially, but I want to understand why someone doesn't,
Mm.
and not assume that I'm right always.
Well, I had a professor tell me once, and I think, it's funny, those tiny gems, right? He told me question everything. And I've just kind of lived by that because I don't always get it right. People make mistakes. But I do think that you're right. There's a lot more groupthink going on. And if anything, this like American rugged individualism, something that's shown through that also equally not perfect, but a lot of that was mindset. A lot of that was standing on your morals and being willing to fight for them. So for me, my family's been in the States for a long time, and I think that is something that has probably rippled through that, we've got all types in my family and all different types of religious beliefs and political beliefs and all of that. But sometimes, well, you're good. Sometimes those conversations are hard, but I think there's definitely that pull still to do what is right and try and have the hard conversations. And if you can't have the hard conversations, then like space bank it for now. Like maybe you have to make an agreement. Like my parents and I, we kind of have this standing agreement right now that we don't talk about politics because we don't agree. And in order to keep some semblance of a relationship, that's just where that has to be for now. And we made an agreement a few months back that I'm like, look, I'm going to keep doing my thing and you guys can do your thing and we'll just agree to disagree for now. But there may come a point where we may have to have some hard conversations because at the end of the day, I'm also a parent. And I think that's hard sometimes for our parents to acknowledge at some point where it's like, right, they are our parents, but we are also parenting the next generation. So we also need to have the independence and the freedom to make the decisions that we think are best for our children that may be different than the thoughts our parents have, like the grandparents to our children, as far as like familial struggles. And I think that is a hard thing right now in the US. There's a lot of opinions and a lot of them may be morally grounded or people think are morally grounded. And some hard talks and some hard lines for people right now.
Oh. Yeah, there definitely are. And it would be great if more and more people really understood that empathy doesn't stop at putting yourself in someone else's shoes, but actually putting yourself in someone else's shoes with their lived experience that is different than yours. Because we tend to think of like, well, if I was there, well, you lived it, you have a different lived life, you have different experiences. Put yourself there from what they see, what they've experienced, what their truth is. And things start looking a lot different.
Well, I think I'm going to have you on again because I think we should have a Canadian section of this podcast. Maybe you can come on every once in a while and give us the Canada highlights. Keep us tethered to reality in Canada.
I don't know how much I could represent all of Canada, but I could definitely represent a Canadian perspective.
You're doing pretty good. I would say, Canada could pay you for an advertisement for immigration to Canada at this point. You're doing great. You're representing Canada well.
That's good. I definitely, that sounds like it would be a lot of fun.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your next project because I know you're working on some other things too.
Yeah. So like I said, the card deck I'm excited about. I'm working on a board game as well.
Okay.
And same idea, just curiosity, conversation. The goal of the game isn't who has the most coins at the end, but who has the most joy. And I'm basically creating everything to work together. So again, it can be this system. And what's really interesting is, it is all based around financial literacy, but it really isn't. It's really what we just had a conversation about. It's mindset, it's values, it's, for those who know, doing the work, but in a way that you don't even realize you're doing it. And so I'm sort of trying to create a system for families so they can easily just get all the pieces. So you get the book, the deck, the board game, video courses, and it's everything you need to start, teaching a little bit more mindfulness teaching values, curiosity, questioning, conversation, getting rid of the taboo around some of these subjects that shouldn't be taboo. And it's not heavy. It's, a 5-year-old can read or play or pull out any of the cards in the same way, a grandparent can. And that's what I've tried to create, is something universal for all ages. And you don't need anything but just pull out a card or roll the dice and you're good to go. So that's what I'm trying to put together. I'm hoping to have a lot of those pieces in place for the fall. Some of them will roll out earlier and then start working to, reach out to, different communities and groups and schools and start introducing these concepts, because they're a completely new way of teaching and talking about financial literacy in a way that's accessible for everyone. Like, that's what I'm really trying to do.
Well, it sounds like you're creating a movement. I think both of us maybe are creating our own little movements just by our moral compasses. So I'm liking that.
Oh, for sure. It's a movement I'm trying to create. Definitely shift the way you think about, I just did a TEDx recently and a lot of it was all based on
I forgot
this
about
idea.
that. How did that go?
It went really well. And hopefully it should be out September, October on the TED platform. I'm not sure when. There's always a bit of delay with getting on the platform there, but went really well. And it's all about just shifting the way we think about saving, spending, giving, living. And I think all those things, we can use a bit of a shift in how we're thinking about those things and a bit of a kinder approach. So maybe it's a bit Canadian in general. I find there's so much judgment, shame, just there's only one way to do it. And if you don't do it this way, then you're bad. And I'd like it to be a lot softer. So even something as simple as like our savers and our spenders, we tend to think one's better than the other. That one isn't better than the other. They're just different. And the more we can start seeing, just understanding even something as simple as that from different perspectives, I think we'll all be a little bit better. So that's the stuff I'm working on right now. And hopefully I'll have those products, like I said, out by the fall. And then I can just start delivering and talking about it, doing the speaking, getting community set up that really is, for a classroom or a local, community or YMCA, all these products, they can just put them out for the kids to play with. And in that play, they will learn these concepts.
Well, I'm excited for you. I think it's amazing what you're doing because it's a positive thing. And I think the world can use more positive things. So whenever you get all your things together and you're starting to sell them, you let me know and we'll put all the links underneath in the podcast notes for anybody that wants to purchase. So we can give a shout out to your book and your board game and your card deck and all of that.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I love that.
Great.
And yeah, we'll definitely do that. And I'll come back and I'll continue giving the Canadian perspective.
That's great. Well, the last thing I want to ask you, I normally try and ask people this, is if people walk away from this today and they can't remember anything besides who you are and what you stand for, like, what do you want to be known for? If people say, who is David Delisle, what do you want them to walk away with?
So all of my branding is underneath the idea of the awesome stuff. So they can find me at theawesomestuff.com. My Instagram's at theawesomestuff. And really what it means, and this is all of this, is just recognizing how much beauty there is and leaning into it. I think too often we go with what's safe and easy and are walking with our eyes closed or our head down when there's just so much more beauty that I think people think, so much more adventure, so much joy, so much excitement. So if I can help people, inspire them to see the beauty in the world and just do a little bit more, that would be what I'd want to be remembered for.
I think that's a great way to be remembered. Well, hey, thanks, David, for coming on. We really appreciate it and can't wait to have you back.
Thanks so much. We'll be back
Talk soon.
We are at a pivotal point in American history. We do not have the luxury to remain silent. Programs are disappearing every day. We hope that this podcast raises awareness and sparks a sense of advocacy in you. We all can make a difference. The important thing is to start. See you next time.